Hello, welcome to the Eclectic Reader. Listen to great books and stories while you use your eyes and hands for other things. Now here's your host, Madison Mason.
Hi there, it's Madison Mason. Thank you for your wonderful comments. I'm so happy you've enjoyed the Great Quarry Boys. This is the final chapter, All Good Things Must Come to an End. This is chapter 66, The Great Quarry Boys. Chapter 66, The Greatest Invention. Okay, I swear I had nothing to do with it. But my genius, Lloyd Klausner, invented what must have been the most noxious substance ever created by the mind of man, even teenage man. It was perfect, beautiful, poetical, and so very, very useful. Lloyd Klausner invented liquid fart. It was truly inspired, and like all great inventions, it made Lloyd a hero and a legend for a long time. I can't explain what possessed him to concoct such a hideous amalgam, or what went into the alchemy of it, but it was exquisite, and he showed up one Tuesday morning in school with a gallon of it in a glass Coca-Cola syrup bottle. This was the point when all the guys developed a deep and abiding respect for Lloyd, when we all realized for certain that he wasn't just a geek, but Lloyd was truly deranged. We dug that a lot. Since our lockers were next to each other, I was the first person he showed it to. His eyes gleamed as he unscrewed the cap. I reeled back in disgust, my own eyes stinging from the fumes. It was horrible. Geez, what the fuck is that? I gasped. What does it smell like? Lloyd retorted, ever logical. Like someone died in a jar. It smells like Godzilla's worst fart. I winced again. Very well done, Watson. You have deduced it, came the stupidest English accent I ever heard. Lloyd was no actor. I was ruminating this weekend on the simple composition of a fart after I cut a really bad one and was sitting in it. It started once I farted. You're certifiable, I giggled. Perhaps, he mused. At any rate, it was interesting enough to warrant an experiment. He always said words like warrant or incumbent, like something would be incumbent upon him. I liked that, but most of the other guys were so stupid they figured he was making these words up. So, after several attempts, I've come up with a fairly close approximation of the gaseous composition emitted in the lower digestive tract by the eupepsia of kidney beans, grapes, and Velveeta cheese. Beans, Velveeta, and grapes, I exploded. Well, they always make me fart, he blinked. I laughed. Let me smell that stuff again. He opened the foul vessel once more, and I cracked up. This kid was going round the bend. Just then Ronnie Knox stepped up. All right, who cut it? Geez, ragazzo, somebody crawl up you and die? Bite me, Knox. This is Lloyd's latest invention, Liquid U. Have a big sniff. Knox took a huge sniff and almost gagged. Wow, that's great, he raved. Give me some. Lloyd mused a moment and leveled his rocket scientist's intelligence at the cretinous Knox. 50 cents a shot. His eyes were gunfighter steady. What? Fuck you, Klausner, Knox bellowed, irate, his football field pride wounded at being twisted by a math geek. Take it or leave it. All right, you shit. Here. He shoved 2 quarters at Lloyd. Go get a cup, Lloyd said quietly and winked at me. Knox wasn't 30 seconds before he was back, slobbering, a little wax Dixie cup melting in a hot, crude hand. Evil glowed in his Neanderthal eyes. I can't wait to throw this shit on Tommy Brooks. I hope he's wearing new clothes. You're sick, Klausner. The compliment deeply touched Lloyd. Knox palmed the cup and slunk down the hall, seeking his victim. A minute later, we heard a terrible commotion in the next wing, and several nauseated-looking girls came down the hall, hands over mouths, followed by shoving and guffawing guys. The ubiquitous phrase, smells like shit, ran across the top of the crowd like maple syrup over pancakes. I didn't see Lloyd the rest of that morning, but his legend must have spread, and he must have been very busy because incident after incident occurred, and more purchases were made, some even by girls. And wardrobe was ruined, practical jokes perpetrated, and long-standing grudges avenged. The air in school became perfumed with the hint of eau de beans, Velveeta, and grapes. The curse of popularity is that it feeds on itself, and fame grows without discretion. So it was with Lloyd. By lunchtime, word of the stench epidemic had reached the ears of the teachers, who had in turn reported it to the principal, who had in turn called in his stool pigeons and traced the origin of the fragrant brew to its source. Imagine their disappointment in discovering the evil perpetrator to be their very own pride and joy, their darling, and this on top of the A-bomb scare. So I'm standing at my locker before entering the poisonous confines of the cafeteria when I see poor Lloyd coming down the hall with a stern-faced army of officials in tow, cutting through the crowd a la Moses in the waters. Nobody looked very happy, particularly Mr. Gaunt, our short, bald, and besieged principal. His resemblance to Edward G. Robinson always struck me as amusing, and I joked with him a lot, but this was clearly not the time. They grimly marched Lloyd to his locker and stood, arms folded, while he tried his combination with trembling hands. The poor kid was never in trouble and wasn't used to authoritarian scare tactics. He was falling apart. He couldn't open his locker. "I'll get it, Lloyd," I said. "What's your combination?" Before he could tell me, old man Bradshaw, the despised shop teacher and meanest son of a bitch kid beater in the Western Hemisphere, barked at me. "This has nothing to do with you, ragazzo. Stay out of it and mind your own business." I shot him a death ray and turned back to Lloyd, who told me the combo, and I opened the locker. Lloyd gave me a pitifully grateful look and leaned down, pulling out the gallon jug of deadly fragrance. This kid had really been busy. Almost half of it was gone already. I quickly calculated that he had probably made about $20. It wasn't worth it in mental anguish, however. He looked like he'd been worked over by the Gestapo. Trembling even more, he held up the jug for them to see. Mr. Gaunt gazed on Lloyd with cool expectation. Lloyd read the look correctly and unscrewed the cap. By now, a huge crowd had gathered to watch, like they do for a bad wreck, fight, or a fire. The powers that be took turns sticking their noses to the mouth of the bottle and wincing. Finally, Mr. Gaunt sighed. "Let's go, Lloyd." Clearly, they intended to scare the crap out of the poor kid and were succeeding. He choked back tears as he resealed the bottle. I wanted to tell them to go fuck themselves and leave him alone, but it would have meant immediate expulsion for me, and I was on hair-thin ice already. Bradshaw was especially enjoying this. He loathed anyone with the slightest modicum of intelligence for obvious reasons. It made him feel more inferior than he already was. Lloyd hugged his baby to his chest as Mr. Gaunt took him by the arm and turned to lead him away. They were surrounded now by hundreds of nosy kids wanting to share in the delightful spectacle of the Geek's downfall. "Let's clear the hall, please," Mr. Gaunt's flat voice rang with stentorian authority. Suddenly, old man Bradshaw decided it was time to take control of the situation. An ulcerous old man, driven by hatred and anger, he was wizened, so eaten by his own bile he could only ingest thin buttermilk for lunch. He thrilled at venting his frustrations on the rumps of students unfortunate enough to gain his enmity with what he termed his Board of Education, an inch-thick oak paddle with holes drilled in it to increase airspeed and inflict maximum pain. We all called him Bandsaw behind his back. "I'll take that," he grimaced, tugging at the evidence. But poor Lloyd was in such a state of blind fear that his hands were locked around the bottle and couldn't let go. "Give me that goddamn bottle, I said," snarled old Bandsaw, who would brook no disobedience. He yanked the bottle from Lloyd's sweaty grasp and fell backwards against Miss Pryor, the secretary mouse, stomping violently on her instep. She screamed in pain, and Bandsaw turned suddenly, I suppose to apologize. She, in agony, pushed him off, hitting the bottle, which flew out of his mean little claws and shot earthward with a vengeance. There was nothing anyone could do. We stood frozen in time, watching, mouths open in disbelief and knowledge of what was coming. We all saw the glass disintegrate into a million shining shards, and the amber liquid explode in a radius of 6 or 8 feet, covering everyone's shoes. It ran through the crowd like fire through a pool of gasoline. For a brief moment all was silent as we stared in horrid disbelief, and the fumes hit us. It was the worst thing you ever smelled in your life. It was horrible, the scent of 1,000 rotting dinosaurs in hell. Absolute pandemonium struck the hall. Suddenly, people were diving out windows, girls fainting, guys stumbling down the halls, gasping, gagging, throwing up. Other girls screamed and teachers yelled, trying in vain to direct an evacuation. Chaos reigned throughout. People crawled into empty classrooms, dragging the wretched stink with them, and kids poured out of the cafeteria like rats from a burning ship. No telling how many people threw up that day. In 2 minutes, the hallway was as empty as the main street of Dodge City before the big shootout. It was determined that the school was uninhabitable until a special toxic chemical team could be sent all the way from Atlanta, and prison was closed until further notice. It was great. Unfortunately, further notice only lasted a week, but it was a week of vacation from school and we had Lloyd to thank for it. And old man Saw. Lloyd Klausner got suspended for a week, and they gave him the week school was closed, so he wasn't really punished at all. I think they were afraid of traumatizing the genius out of him and didn't want to take any chances on losing their star brain. Why screw around? And what might he come up with next? The hall never did smell quite right again, and certain of the weaker or more dramatic girls wouldn't even walk down it to the cafeteria. It was ever after known as Fart Hall. I managed to stay in school and even improve my grades, but the damage is done. I've grown up too fast and I can never look back. Now I wonder how much I may have missed. But my destiny comes to me in this shape, so I'll live it, happy without regret. Hey, we all have our own movies. I may not have learned much in junior high, and even less in high school that will truly be of use in later life, because they aren't teaching me about life, but cramming my rebellious head full of useless dates and facts, and testing me to prove that I can memorize a litany of pointless info to their satisfaction. Hey, sorry, I can't. Oh well. And I may never have learned anything from the fertile and advanced mind of Lloyd Klausner, but this and this alone, which may have been worth it all. However alien I'm made to feel, rejecting a system which is in my eyes dysfunctional, I'm no different, no stranger than anyone else. And I'm cool with that. You ought to think that way too. Lloyd Klausner does not, as you may guess, enter into a life of crime, but in fact goes to work for NASA, and one of his rockets will one day be rounding Jupiter. And hey, am I surprised? Nope. There are effects and side effects in life. One minor miracle did occur from all this. I can't swear it was the direct result of anything I may have witnessed, but this year Gwendy Mullis sprouted a very righteous pair of headlights. Although no matter what she does, her hair will never again hold a curl. Unfortunately, however, her substantial knockers do nothing to improve her personality. She sports them with her arrogant conceit and is engaged to marry a dweeb who works in a bank and plans to run for the city council. She drives that guy like a new Pontiac. I'll scan the news in anticipation of a scandal. Whenever I think of Lloyd, I always ask, as the guy said, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of man? The shadow do. Cool. Your man, Teddy Ragazzo.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of The Eclectic Reader. Please go on to the next numbered episode to continue. Also, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you'd like to help support the project, you can donate under Madison Mason at Patreon. And please, check out our website, kltkrdr.com, for more information.
Hi, this is Madison Mason. I want to personally thank you for listening to The Eclectic Reader and invite you to share your experience, your thoughts, and your suggestions. We have many great books lined up for the future, but if you have requests for anything that is in the public domain, please email us at kltkrdr@gmail.com.
kltkrdr@gmail.com